this computer. So let's see where I find the PowerPoint. Here we have it. So we can jump right into the. Okay. Do you actually see the screen now?
No, just you.
Okay. I forgot to turn it on properly. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then we can start the slideshow. Okay, well, welcome to the 7th lecture of my Classical Greek Introductory course. Today, we are learning a few new paradigms. First, we are going to acquaint ourselves with the so-called Attic second declension. You find the paradigm for nouns in the Attic second declension with the noun neos, which is the Attic Greek word for temple, on page 46 in the Cambridge Grammar of Classical Greek. Further, we are going to look at the paradigms of a few contracted nouns and adjectives following the first and second declensions. You find some paradigms for contracted adjectives following the first and second declension on page 64 and 65 in the grammar. The Attic second declension was thus named in the Hellenistic age by Alexandrian grammarians. These scholars thought of the paradigm that we are learning today as typical for the Attic Greek dialect. Originally, words of this kind had ended in aos with a long alpha, but in the Eastern Greek dialects, this ending changed to eos, and finally through a so-called metathesis quantitatis to eos in Attic Greek, so that the ending received a long o sound, that is an omega. Metathesis quantitatis literally means switch of quantity, and exactly this is what has happened here. Two vowels have switched their lengths so that the originally long vowel became short and the short one long. The original forms of neos, naos, and neos, however, are retained in some dialects in the classical period too, as well as that they reoccur in later Greek language variants. Thus, in earlier Homeric Greek, temple is the Ionic neos, and not naos nor neos. But in the eclectic Koine Greek, in which the New Testament was composed, we again have naos. We may note too that the Attic neos has an acute accent instead of a circumflex. The circumflex would be expected above a concluding omega, but in neos, the original accentuation is maintained, although the vowel lengths have switched. We find other examples of metathesis quantitatis in connection with the third declension words, but these we will look at a later stage. There are actually not that many words which are inflected according to the Attic second declension, and one learns them as one goes along, so to speak. But let us look at the paradigm for the inflection of neos. It's good to be familiar with this paradigm, or at least have seen it once, since otherwise the forms it contains may cause confusion, as one stumbles upon them in the texts. But here we have in the singular, neos in the nominative, neo in the genitive, neo in the dative, neon in the accusative, and neos in the vocative. And in the plural, we have neo in the nominative, neon in the genitive, neos in the dative, neos in the accusative, and neo in the vocative. What's noteworthy here is that there is an iota subscript underneath both the dative singular and the plural forms of the noun, as well as under the nominative plural form of the word, which causes the nominative plural form to be identical with the dative singular form. In this case, then only the context can determine which case and number we are actually confronted with. Other Greek words that are inflected according to the Attic second declension include leos, people, kalos, rope, lagos, hair, minos, and heos, which means dawn. Some of these terms also have a different inflection in the accusative singular than other nouns of this type. For instance, heos, which has an accusative singular form, heo. However, the accusative form heon actually also exists. Speaking of heos, by the way, we might be reminded of the rose-fingered dawn, Rhododactylos heos, which is a common figure in Homer and which is alluded to repeatedly in Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time as well. In classical Greek, we also find a few adjectives that are inflected according to the Attic second declension. And we will see how these are inflected in what follows. As a first example, we have here hileos, hileon, which means favorable. And this is an adjective with two endings, and therefore it has the same inflection in the masculine and the feminine gender. Hileos has originally been hilaos and then evolved into hileos through the intermediary step hileos by means of the aforementioned metathesis quantitatis. So this is how this adjective is inflected. In the singular, we have here the masculine and feminine, hileos in the nominative, hileo in the genitive, hileo in the dative, hileon in the accusative, and hileos in the vocative. And in the neuter, we have hileon in the nominative, hileo in the genitive, hileo in the dative, hileon in the accusative, and hileon in the vocative. And if we take the plural next, we have here in the masculine and feminine nominative, hileo in the nominative, hileon in the genitive, hileos in the dative, hileos in the accusative, and hileo in the vocative. And in the neuter, we have hilea in the nominative, hileon in the genitive, hileos in the dative, hilea in the accusative, and hilea in the vocative. Another adjective which is partly inflected according to the Attic second declension, and which in turn is of the three-ending type, is pleos, plea, pleon, which means full. Here, the feminine forms follow the feminine variant of the first declension with long alpha ending, whereas the masculine and the neuter correspond to hileos, hileon, which we just looked at. So I won't go through these forms, but you can contemplate them for a while. Okay. Next, we turn to contracted nouns in the second declension. There is no good explication of this in the Cambridge Grammar, but I have gathered information from elsewhere. The examples we will deal with here are the nouns nus, meaning mind, and ostun, which means bone. The latter also has a common uncontracted form, which is to osteon. So, which are the vowels that have been drawn together in these nouns? In nus, the original uncontracted form is nos. So here we have a fusion of two omicrons. While in the other example, it is epsilon and omicron that have been drawn together. However, in both cases, the resulting diphthong is the same. That is u and omicron and then epsilon combined. So if you look at the paradigms of these two nouns, we have in the first example, in the singular, nus in the nominative, nu in the genitive, no in the dative, nun in the accusative, and nu in the vocative. And in the plural, we have noi in the nominative, noon in the genitive, nois in the dative, nus in the accusative, and noi in the vocative. Turning to the second example, we have in the singular ostun in the nominative, ostu in the genitive, osto in the dative, ostun in the accusative, and ostun in the vocative. Then in the plural, we have osta in the nominative, oston in the genitive, ostois in the dative, osta in the accusative, and osta in the vocative. In case you wonder why the nominative, accusative, and vocative forms have long alphas, this is because the contraction between the concluding epsilon in the stem oste and the short alpha in the normal nominative, accusative, and vocative neutral plural endings. Of course, it could be expected that the contraction of epsilon and alpha would result in a long e sound, that is in an eta. But the long a sound is here clearly a result of the influence of the normal neutral plural ending, which is an alpha. But these details are not mandatory knowledge. Okay, let's turn to the final topic of today, which is contracted adjectives. We will look at 3 examples of these. In the next chapter of our textbook, we will encounter some adjectives of the contracted kind. Of these, eunus, which is a contracted form of eunos and means well-meaning, is of the 2-ending type, whereas chrysos, which is contracted from chryseos and means golden, as well as argyros, which is contracted from argyreos and means silvern, are of the 3-ending type. So now we can end this lecture by contemplating the paradigms for the inflection of these adjectives for a while. Here we have first the paradigms for chrysos and argyros. And here is the one for eunus. Okay, that was the end of the actual lecture, but I thought we could look at some bonus material as well. So we had the present indicative forms of the verb to be, Amy, last time. So this 6 first one here are the present indicative forms of Amy. So I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, you are, and they are. So if you look at the imperfect forms of this verb, next, they are the 6 last ones here. So then we have I was, you were, he, she, it was, we were, you were, and they were here. So en, esta, en, emen, ette, esa for the imperfect. And you can note here also the nyfl-kystikon in many of these forms, which is sometimes there, sometimes not. Okay, and then I thought we could end with looking at the short overview of the Greek verbal system, but what it all contains and what we had so far. So in the Greek verbal system, it's quite complex. It's one of the more complex verbal systems of European languages. So it has 7 tenses. So far we have had the present and the imperfect, but we can look forward to the future, the aorist, the perfect, the pluperfect, and then also the future perfect, or the so-called futurum exactum. Then there are 4 moods. So what we've had so far is the indicative, used for factual happenings or events usually, and then we had the imperatives, so commands. But then there are two more moods that will come later. So we got the subjunctive and the optative. Then there are 3 voices. So we've had all of these 3 so far. Actually, we had the active, so that's when the subject is the one who acts. Then we've had the middle or medial, where there also is a subject usually acting. And then finally we've had the passive voice. And in the passive voice, the subject is acted upon. So the subject is actually the object of the action, usually, when there's the passive voice is used. Then we have 3 persons and 3 numbers. So we have the second, first, and third person singular. Dual as well as plural, but the dual forms we will mostly skip during this course, as I've said before. Then we have also these additional verbal forms. So we have participles, we have infinitives, and we have verbal adjectives. So we haven't had any participles yet, but some present infinitive forms I think we've had. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've had some of them. But we can look forward to many participle forms and infinitives as well, more infinitives, and also verbal adjectives. So yeah. Then we could finally also take a short overview of how a classical Greek verb form should be analyzed. So if someone asks you to analyze classical Greek verb form, what do they do? Well, usually you find a sentence and then one verb form is underlined in that sentence, and that then you will be asked, if it's an exam for instance, to analyze that verb form. And what should this analysis then contain? Well, first of all, it's good, of course, to know what the sentence says. So here we have Spartiatai enamidzan evialten aitian einai. So this means the Spartans thought or considered Ephialtes to be guilty. It could be translated as. And here I've underlined this verb for enomizon. So then we can first we can think what's its person and number is. Then we can look at the ending. This on ending is a third person plural ending. It can also be a first person singular ending, because if you remember, we had this in the last lecture. the first person singular and the third person plural are identical when it comes to active imperfect forms. But in this case, we can know from the context, because the subject is in the plural, that it's a third person plural form. So it's a third person plural form. Then we have the person and number first. Then next we can ask what voice it is in. Then we can again look at the ending. So this is an active imperfect ending, this on. So then we know that the voice is active. The tense, well, I already said that it's an imperfect based on this ending here. Again, this on, and we can also look at this augment here, this epsilon, which helps us to determine that it's an imperfect form. And then we can also, finally, we can look at the root, which is this nomits. So this is the same root as in the present tense. So if it's the same root as in the present tense and it's augmented, then we can know that it's an imperfect form. Because if it would be, for instance, some other augmented past tense form, for instance, an aorist, which we haven't had yet, then the stem would be different from the present tense. But here is the same. So that's how we know that it's an imperfect form. And then we look at the mood, and then we can again turn to the endings. So the endings will tell us that this is an indicative ending. So we haven't had actually anything else than the indicative and the imperfect when it comes to moods yet. But we know that this is an indicative ending. Then you may also be asked, for instance, to analyze some non-finite forms, for instance, infinitives. So here we have a sentence which says, "Vois partiata enomitsaan efelteen aittiaan einai." Again, same sentence, but this time it's another verb form which is underlined. So it's this einai, to be. So then it's enough just to say that it's an active infinitive form, or maybe even just an infinitive form would be enough in this case, because it's einai, which is Amy. It doesn't really have any active or middle or passive form, so there's no actual moods when it comes to the verb to be. It's a special verb in that sense. So that's basically what you need to do if you analyze some classical Greek verb. Give this, you have to give the person number, and usually if it's a finite form, you have to give the person and the number, you have to give the voice, you have to give the tense, and you have to give the mood. And then if you want to shine and show how extremely well you know ancient Greek, then you can also give the basic form. So the basic form is the form that you find in the dictionary. And that's the active present indicative first person singular form, which is nomitso, I think, I deem, or something like this. Yeah. So that was the lecture. Then we turn to the chapter that we had. So I think we had chapter 5. It was a short story on Thermopylae, the battle at Thermopylae. So we can take this next and see what we can make of it, and see if we have someone who wants to try to translate as well. How is it with you, Nigel? Would you like to try to translate this first sentence? If I take the title, it's en Thermopylaes mache. So that means the battle at Thermopylae or something like this.
Yeah. So the first line, Leonidas and his Spartans, and the Spartans, his Spartans, made a stand at Thermopylae. They've fought with much bravery against the Persians of Xerxes. And And then hoi hefsan pole, even though there were many, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a possible translation. So what kind of word is this hoi here?
Is it pronoun?
Exactly. And what kind of pronoun?
First person plural.
No, it's not. Since it's a pronoun, you don't have persons.
Okay, so it's.
But it's like, is it a personal pronoun? Like for instance, like ego, I would be a personal pronoun, or autos, he, that would be a personal pronoun, or is it some other kind of pronoun? We've had, for instance, relative pronouns.
Yeah.
So could it be a relative pronoun?
Well, it's not.
It's
I
a
don't know
relative.
if it's personal.
It's a relative pronoun.
Yeah.
So relative pronoun is like who or which. So in this case, it could be because it's an masculine plural nominative personal pronoun, hoi.
Right.
It could be who, maybe.
Yeah.
It could mean who. So your translation was very well, but this were very good. But this pronoun maybe be, yeah, who were many, exactly. That would be a literal translation. The Persians of Xerxes, who were many. So exactly, yeah, that would be the literal translation. But really good work. Maybe you would like to, because the sentence actually continues all the way here to den machen. Would you like to try to translate the rest of the sentence as well?
Or it was not beseeming, or it was not beseeming to the Spartans to flee a battle.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to put that in proper English, but
yeah, I mean, if you can think of a more idiomatic translation, I just looked at the LSD and it had like for preppe, this is an impersonal form of preppe, in the imperfect. So it was not beseeming, but
yeah,
it was not fitting, or I don't know what the best idiomatic English translation. You can think of an alternative. So
it's not fitting for the Spartans to flee from battle.
Yeah. So what kind of verb form is this, if you analyze it?
It's infinitive.
Infinitive. And what would be the voice? Would it be passive or
the active?
Active, exactly. So this "ein" ending tells you that it's an
active.
Yeah, active infinitive form. Exactly. Very good. Okay, Tofi, no, you didn't have time to look at this translation for today. Can you make something out of this second sentence?
And they?
Yeah, we start here from this heton person, and so on. So if you look at this first clause here, first of all, heton person stratia fovera hen. Fovera en, what would that mean? What could that mean?
I would have gone for and they, but I think that's probably the first two.
Yeah, well, where is the predicate, first of all? If you look at the predicate, so the verb form, the finite verb form, where do you find it here? So it's this en. So that's an imperfect form of Amy, which means to be. So it's third person singular imperfect of Amy. So was, this is was. And then we have the subject is here. So here we have the he, this definite article, feminine nominative, singular definite article. It's connected to this stratia. So we have here an attributive genitive here in the middle. Heton person stratia. That would be the army of the Persians. Heton person stratia was the army of the Persians was, what was it? So here we have an adjective form which acts like a complement.
Strong.
Yeah, phobera means frightful or something. Fearsome, maybe. Fearful, maybe. Or something like this. So the army of the Persians was fearful or frightening. And then we have, what do we have here? Allah. What was Allah? Does anyone remember? But exactly. So it's Allah. It's one alpha has been disappeared because the following word begins with a vowel. And then we have what does it continue? What does hoi hoplitai mean?
Hoplites.
The hoplites. But the hoplites, and then
Of the Spartans.
Of the Spartans. And what then?
That's a negative. So So it's did not hold. We're not. Yeah. We're not holding fear. Yeah, that Artes I had. I wasn't quite sure how that fitted in.
So this is an pronoun, right? Personal pronoun.
Yeah.
It's what case is it in? Nominative, dative, or it's genitive here. Autes.
Is it indicative?
It's a genitive.
Genitive. So genitive, but it's genitive singular, is it?
Yes, exactly. Genitive singular. So what does it connect to? For autes, it must be. It must refer back towards the word stratia, right? That's it.
Okay.
Correct. So they did not have fear of the army.
Persians.
Okay.
So, but the hoplites of the Spartans did not have fear of it. So the army here. Autes can be he, she, or it, but here it refers to the
Must be it.
to the army, so it's it. But of course, it's more common to have this kind of personal pronouns referring back to things or non-animate objects in Greek than what it is in English, because you have the cases and the different genders, which makes it easy to know what it refers to, what the pronoun refers to. Or not easy, but you can at least deduce it. But yeah, that was really good as well. Then we have a shorter sentence. Who wants to take this one? Episteuan garto Leonida. Does anyone have a suggestion? Yeah, if you have a suggestion, please.
Yeah, it's because they were led by Leonidas.
Yeah, that could be the meaning. So pisteuo is usually translated as trust. I trust.
Okay, pisteuo. Yeah. Okay.
So what tense is this pisteuon in?
Imperfect.
Imperfect. How do you know it's an imperfect?
Because it ends in on and it begins with an e.
Exactly. So it has this augment here.
Mm.
So pisteuo is the basic form.
Yeah,
but then we have
trusted.
Yes.
That makes sense. And then the dative is a dative of. Oh God, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, it's pisteuo usually takes a dative.
Takes
a dative, so that's why it's a dative. So they trusted Leonidas. That's just because they trusted Leonidas. Okay, next sentence then. If you begin with this first clause here, Polindeon chronon Andreas hypemenon. What would that mean? Anyone?
They were holding their ground for a long time bravely. So they bravely held the ground for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. That's the meaning. So this is an adverb, bravely, as you said.
Yeah.
Andreas. Good. And this is actually an polychronon. This is an accusative of time. So time is often used when you express the expression of time. You often use accusative. So much time, or for a long time. Polychronon. Polychronon. Okay, but then next clause. Al Ephialtes ho prodotes ege pollus ton tu xerxus stratioton katakrypteen hodon. If you stop there. But exactly, yes. And then
I'm just trying to think, is that Persian?
Yeah,
this,
he was the traitor.
yeah, Ephialtes. It's a name. So that's the name of the traitor. The traitor of the Spartans, who betrayed the
The
Spartans.
hoplites.
Yeah, Leonidas and his hoplites. He betrayed them. So that's just a name. But Ephialtes, so he's the subject here. Then we have a complement again to Ephialtes. So we have this ho, Ephialtes ho prodotes. So Ephialtes the betrayer. But Ephialtes the betrayer, and then we have the predicate. Ege, so that's an imperfect form of ago. Led. Yeah, led Polluston to Xerxes Stratioton. That's many of Xerxes' soldiers. And then we have Katakrypteen Hodon. Along an concealed or hidden road, or a secret road, maybe. Crypte, secret or concealed. And then what do we have then? Hoste es noton tu Leonidu es pipteen kai perignestai. So this is a consecutive clause, which is introduced with this conjunction hoste. Yeah. So it means so that is noton into the back to Leonidu of Leonidas, exactly. They could fall and win. So that would be the literal translation, but then you can think of something better. If you have
those are both the ace.
Come again. I didn't hear you.
And but both of those, the ace pipton and the perigignestai, are infinitives, are they?
They are, exactly.
Yeah.
And what voice is this first infinitive? Active or passive?
Active voice.
Active. And this one?
Passive.
Well, that's passive
in middle.
Passive in middle, exactly. So perigignestai means defeat or win. In the middle, gignomai, perigignomai, defeat or win. So I would say it's in the middle here, because it's there's a subject here performing. Win, I win, perigignomai. But here it's they win. So yeah, this is an intended result that's given expression to these two infinitives when they are part of this consecutive clause, hoste, so that they could fall in the back of Leonidas and defeat him. So the whole sentence would be they. Well, it's a long sentence. We took it already. So if you want to look through it again, you can look at the recording. So let's move on to the next last sentence. Does anyone have any suggestions here then for this last one? Yeah, please.
Therefore, the Spartans were considering or knowing or acknowledging Ephialtes the betrayer.
So far,
So yeah, they held him responsible for the victory of the Persians.
yeah, exactly. That would be the meaning.
Yeah.
So yeah, therefore, the Spartans. So the subject is here, the Spartans.
Yeah.
The Spartiatai, and then we have the predicate here. And so that's usually a very good way. If you're unsure, begin with finding the subject and the predicate in the sentence. So that's very good to start with. Hoi Spartia. So here we have the subject. Hoi Spartiatai, the Spartans, and then here we have the predicate, the finite verb. Enomizan, thought or considered. So the Spartans considered. Therefore, the Spartans considered Ephialtes the betrayer to be the cause or the reason for the Persians' victory. Would be the problem. So impressive work, really good work with the translations. And yeah, I'll send you new material tomorrow, and this was a pleasure again. So any questions now, or any more comments or anything?
No, it's
good. That was really, really, really good. Thanks, and hope you again next week. And write me if you have some questions or anything in between.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.